Hello, I'm Liselle Sambury and welcome back to my channel where I talk about all things writing, traditional publishing, and a little bit of reading. And today we are at the final video in the Save the Cat deep dive series. Very excited to be here. If you haven't seen any of these videos before, what this is a series that I've made in which I talk about the way that I use the Save the Cat story structure in my own writing. If you have never heard of Save the Cat, I have links below that I recommend checking out, which are the original Blake Schneider screenwriting Save the Cat guide, as well as Save the Cat Writes a Novel by Jessica Brody, which is what I read and what I use. So I recommend going and reading one of those first and then coming back to this series. If you have read Save the Cat already, I will also put links down below to the entire playlist that I have for all of these videos where I'm doing this, as well as a video in which I talk about creating complex characters, which I also recommend watching before diving into this full series, because I do use that sort of character arc as a basis as well for how I go through this story structure. I'd also like to say that this is not prescriptive. These are not hard and fast rules. You can do whatever you want. I am just sharing how I use these in my own writing, in my own process, in the hopes that it is also helpful for you. So I think that's everything out of the way, and I'm excited to jump into these. Usually I do the definition in my intro, but because I'm talking about two beats today, both the finale and the final image, I'm going to do their Save the Cat description right when I talk about them. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's start with the definition of this beat. So Save the Cat Writes a Novel says that the finale resolves all the problems created in Act 2 and proves that your hero has learned the theme and been transformed. And it is also 20% of the novel. So that is the definition Save the Cat gives. And the first thing I want to talk about in the finale is the 5-point finale. And so what Jessica Brody has done is she has broken down the finale beat into these 5 sub beats in order to provide more structure for the finale, which is 20% of the novel. I wish this had been done for some other sections like fun and games. I think it would have been really helpful to help have breakdowns for like fun and games and bad guys close in, and like maybe in the future that may or may not be something that happens, but in any case, for the finale there is a breakdown, and so it's called the 5-point finale. The 5-point finale consists of gathering the teams / tools, executing the plan, high tower surprise, dig deep down, and then finally the execution of a new plan. So those are the 5 points. I'm not going to go super in depth into them here because I quite honestly don't really use them, and this whole series is about really how I use the beats in my own kind of work, and so I don't want to get into the nitty-gritty of going through each of those just to kind of be like, and I don't do them. So if you have read the Save the Cat, which I again recommend doing before you get into this series, you'll already know what all those are, but a lot of them are quite self-explanatory. But the reason I don't use these, so in perfect transparency, when I first read this book, I just completely forgot that that was a thing that she had laid out, was this 5-point finale, and I kind of just did my own thing, and so that was originally why I didn't end up doing it. But then later on, when I knew about it, I still ended up not doing it because I found it, interestingly enough, to be too prescriptive, especially for a beat that is 20% of the book, which 20% is like a significant chunk, but I didn't feel significant enough to warrant having that many details of like these are the things you do, and so that ended up being something that I just kind of didn't like and didn't want to use, and so that's also part of the reason why I don't do the 5-point finale. And in the book itself, Jessica Brody says you don't have to do the 5-point finale. This is not something you have to do. There are lots of books that don't fall into that sort of formula, but she does recommend trying it, and I do think that's very fair, because I think if you are really lost and you're not really sure where to go with with your finale, I think it is worthwhile to try it out even as an exercise, just to kind of give yourself somewhere to go. Or not, because I'm about to tell you exactly what I do and how I set up my finale. So if I'm not going to do the 5-point finale, how do I start my finales? And how I start them is I really jump right into it. So when we are coming, the beat before this is that break into 3. So in the beat before that, in the Dark Night of the Soul, they had their Dark Night epiphany, and then in break into 3, they decide, okay, I'm gonna fix things the right way. And so how I like to go into the finale is to immediately create a problem for the main character, because in creating this problem for the main character, it pushes the action forward. It immediately gives them something to do to prove that they are in fact going to fix things the right way, and it also raises the stakes, and it kind of gives like a really, to me, kind of high-paced or fast-paced sort of slide into the finale. So for example, in my debut novel, Blood Like Magic, what this was is that her family was stolen / kidnapped, and she had to go save them. So that right away is a problem, because okay, I have to go save my family. The stakes, like I said, are raised, because what will happen if she doesn't go to save her family is they will be murked, you know. So she has to go and do it. And then when you're going into that finale, it is immediately starting with this like fast jogging pace, which I really like. And so I will say that this can encompass parts of that 5-point finale. So that gathering the team, she can be like, okay, who can help me? Who can I ask for help to go do this? Be forced to make amends with certain characters, etc., in order to do that. And so that can be part of it. And then executing the plan. So she has to create a plan for how she's going to go and save her family, and she's going to execute it. And so it is technically encompassing those first 2 parts of the 5-point finale, but very quickly. And also, to me, the emphasis is on this problem. It is on immediately creating some sort of barrier that your main character is pushed up right against right from the get-go. So it's kind of like, you know, they're into break into 3 and they're like, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna fix things the right way. And it's like, okay, how? Because you have something to do right now. So what are you gonna do to do it? And I just like that idea of just jumping right into it and hitting the ground running. And I think this also provides for you, the author, a lot of forward momentum in kind of knowing, okay, now I have an obstacle for the finale, and I'm kind of creating this almost self-contained little bit in order to get through that. But of course it's not self-contained, because everything that the character has learned and experienced before that is going to come into play in some way. The next step in this self-constructed 5-point finale, though it's not 5 points at all, but the next step for me is that the character has to fail. And so when I am putting this together and I'm constructing this, I'm planning this out, I have to figure out, okay, what is this failure moment for them going to be? Because the point is, like, what they have achieved, they've moved from wants to needs fully now by Act 3. So they're going into Act 3 with like, I'm focusing on what I need, not what I want. I no longer believe the lie. Here we go. But it's fragile. Like they're a little baby. They're at the beginning of this journey, and so you want to push them a little bit, and you want to kind of give them a nudge to make sure that they are solidly within that sort of foundation. You want to challenge them, you want to make things hard. And so setting up, it is setting them up for failure, but setting them up for failure is a great way, I find, to challenge that. And so I immediately think of, okay, how are they going to fail in this whole thing? And so I can't even use an example from Blood Like Magic because I will spoil things for the book. But you know, she goes into that situation to save her family, and I already thought, okay, this is how she can fail. And it's also a great way for your character to really like double down on that belief, to really be challenged and be like, no, I'm sticking to what I need. And even though I've failed, that hasn't kind of stopped me. Again, assuming a positive character arc for all of this. And I will say again, going back to that 5-point finale, this could be considered the high tower surprise. So that sort of surprising element that comes out could be seen as the failure, as well as the dig deep down, which is where they're supposed to really, you know, dig into their inner conflict and, you know, push through. And so it again can technically also relate to those. It's just that I specifically made it a failure. I also find that this helps raise the stakes as well, and like kind of legitimizes the stakes, because it shows that, oh, the character might fail all of this. Like, it's not actually so easy. They're not just gonna go, you know, straight up in the character development. They're having some bumps. They're having a really big drop in this failure, and I think that makes it more interesting for readers, more realistic for readers, and readers can feel a little bit worried about if the main character is actually going to succeed, is actually going to get through this, or if they get through this, what are they going to lose in this process? And so that's why I like to set up this failure. Another thing I like to do is I like to add in a little twist, or a couple little twists, at least one. I will be the first to admit that I'm a little bit overly obsessed with twists in my book, and I really like getting to put them in. And so perhaps you will not be as interested in doing this in your own books, but I do find that adding in a little twist can also add to the sort of dynamicness of this beat and of this kind of bouncing ball narrative that you kind of want to have going in this beat, as you want to have going throughout the whole novel. But I find that this is kind of a, you know, not necessarily a straightforward way, but it's one of those things where I was like, if you put this in the finale, it will automatically add a sort of dynamicness to the book, assuming that you are pulling off the twist well. And this is kind of where the Save the Cat planning becomes a little bit non-linear, because to me, this shouldn't be a twist that you just put in this finale, and this is the only place it exists. To me, this is a twist that has been built upon throughout the entire novel. So when you get into planning your finale and you decide, okay, this is gonna be my twist at the end, now you gotta go back through the rest of the beats and kind of put down little spots and breadcrumbs so that when the reader gets to this twist, it's really satisfying, it's a really great build-up, and it's really exciting because they're like, oh yeah, I remember this, or this happened, or this thing happened. And so it's a really satisfying twist. And so that is how I would put this together. Again, going back to that 5-point finale, just so you can have these kind of touch points on the differences, this could also be the Hightower surprise, because the Hightower surprise is something kind of unexpected happens, or something that surprises the main character or kind of catches them off guard. And so that could very easily be a twist. I'm just specifically deciding that's what it's going to be. Next, we're going to talk about the win. This to me is a very important part of the finale, and it's kind of interesting that Save the Cat doesn't really address this in the 5-point finale, and so the last beat of that finale is executing the new plan. And I guess that's to be open-ended, maybe the plan goes well or not, but we're talking about a positive character arc consistently, so I assume that the plan is going to go well and it's going to succeed. For me, it's important to concentrate on this win specifically because it is part of the character's arc. It is part of their whole journey, because this moment when they win, they defeat the big bad, or they, you know, perform at prom, or whatever it is. Do people perform at prom? They probably don't. Whatever it is that the character finally achieves at the end of this finale, you know, the solving of the problem that they go into the finale with, they finally get that win. That should be because of their journey. They should only have been able to get that win because they stopped believing in the lie and they went from what they wanted to what they needed. And so for me in text, I will try to make this like kind of explicit. For you, it really depends on your story. You might want it to be more subtle. You might want it to be a little bit more like, I want the reader to know. It really depends on your writing style. But for me, it's just important that it be evident that that is the reason why they won. Act 1 version of them could not have done this. Act 2 version of them could not have done this. It has to be the 3rd act version of them that is able to do this, and that is the only reason they're able to get to this point of the win. And of course, with the caveat that this does not have to be a perfect sunshine and roses win. Like, maybe they have lost friends along the way. Maybe something else has gone bad. They had that failure earlier. Maybe that has lasting consequences for them. But ultimately, this is kind of the big win of the book. It's fine if it's bittersweet, but that's kind of why I like to concentrate on it and think about this, is because I want to see that kind of fulfillment of the arc, because this is kind of that biggest fulfillment point for the character. And then I end the finale by wrapping everything up. This is also something that I find interesting that Save the Cat doesn't address in that specific way, at least not from what I saw. Maybe I'm wrong. I might be wrong. I'm a regular person. I can err. But this is something I also find interesting that isn't kind of from what I've seen directly discussed, which is this wrap up. I do think it's important to have a moment to wrap up everything that has happened in the story. The length of that is really something you need to play with and be careful of, because if you do a little bit too much wrapping up, it can kind of become a little bit exhausting to a reader. They can be like, oh my god, is this done or is this done? So there definitely is a balancing act with that. But for me, I just want to be able to show the character living in this new world. They have won, they are fulfilled, they have done their whole journey, and I want to give readers a moment to see them doing that and to see and enjoy that, because I find, maybe this is just me personally as a reader, I really like that. It really upsets me when a book ends super abruptly and you never get to see any of that stuff, because as a reader, at least me as a reader, I'm very curious about those things, and that's why I like to do this wrapping up. This is also a great spot to kind of tie off any loose ends in the story that you couldn't get to in the rest of the finale or the rest of the book. You don't have to tie off every loose end, but if there are like kind of big major ones that are sticking out that you want to kind of bring full circle, this is a great spot for it. I find this is also a great spot if you have a romance and you want to kind of show the couple happy and together. This is also a good moment to put that in. And it's just kind of a good spot to round things off. This is also a spot where if you are writing a sequel, you can also use this moment to kind of hint at what's to come down the line, to entice readers and to kind of tease about the things that are going to be coming in the next book. And so to kind of open some doors a little bit, like crack open some doors, because I think when you think of an ending, you're like, okay, now I'm gonna take the open door and I'm gonna close it. And to me, this wrapping up for a series can mean kind of like pushing open, or like just a smidge knocking open some new doors, to get readers kind of built up for, oh, this is probably going to happen in the next book, or oh, are they going to talk about this in the next book, like building that. You won't always be able to do that for sure. In traditional publishing, there is a thing of like the first book in your series making it seem like it can stand alone, and so sometimes you kind of just need to wrap up and leave it. But if you know that you are going to get to write more books in the series, that's the time when I want to do stuff like that. I want to start to introduce a few things, not introduce so much. Like you don't want to bang the door open and readers are like, what was that? Now I don't know any of that. You just a little tiny nudge, so that they like peek through a little bit and they're like, okay, I'm interested. I'm picking up what you're putting down, sort of thing. And so that's what I like to do in the wrap up. Before we continue on to the final image, I just want to give some last thoughts on this finale. Again, what I went through is not super drastically different than the 5-point finale. It's just kind of a different focus to me, and to me also kind of a more simple way to go about it, and a little bit more open, I find, than kind of what feels like to me a little bit more squished parameters with the 5-point finale. But again, you can do whatever you want. I think the only thing that is really important for this beat is to make sure you have that bouncing ball narrative. Your character needs to be challenged. They need to push through things. Even though they've gotten to this point where they have moved from wants to needs, where they no longer believe the lie, you can't make it easy for them to win. They do need to be challenged challenged. Otherwise, it's not a very exciting story. It's not a very fun story. And so that's really the point of all these things. That's the point of the 5-point finale. That's the point of what I'm doing, is just to help make sure that you are doing that sort of up and down bouncing ball narrative thing, because otherwise the finale is going to be really painful. It's going to be really kind of one note, and I feel like readers are going to be disappointed when they get to the end because it is not going to feel earned. And that's the thing, like, you want that win for the character to feel like they earned it, to feel like they went through something to get there, and you want people to feel pushed to finish the book. And so that, I think, is really the most important part of the finale. For the final image, the Save the Cat Writes a Novel definition says that if the opening image is the before snapshot, then the final image is the after snapshot. So you are seeing the character in their after mode, after they have done everything in the story, after they have come through their entire character arc. That is what you are seeing in this final image. And so for me, there's really kind of two main ways that I would say this is often done. I won't say can be done. You can do this any way you want. These are just kind of the two main ways that stick out to me, that I myself do it and that I see other people doing it, which is either to compare and contrast with the opening image, or to tease or hint at the character's future. This compare and contrast sort of mechanic for doing your final image is where you kind of go back to the opening image, you think of what the character was doing then, and you do something in the final image that either kind of, you know, does a sort of compare and contrast moment. And so one way you can do this is you can have a kind of opposite situation. So if in the opening your main character was like sitting on the back porch of their house and looking out at their small town, let's say, and saying, wow, I can't stand being here. I really, you know, I just got to get out of this place. So then you might have a final image in which you do kind of a compare thing. So where they're sitting on the exact same back porch, but they have a different outlook looking out at their small town now. They're thinking something very different than they thought the first time. Or you can have a kind of contrast. So they're in a complete, say they're in the big city like they wanted to be, and they're on their back balcony and they're looking out and they're like, wow, this is amazing. This is everything I've ever wanted. That sort of situation. And you are doing a kind of more direct callback to that opening image, which I know that example is extremely literal, but I'm trying to make it very clear to you. It can also be metaphorical. So for example, if the opening image was like blood and gore and violence, you might have the final image to be something that's more about peace and healing and like serenity, something like that, which is again a more kind of less literal, more kind of thematic type of compare and contrast. And so this can really be as kind of literal or as subtle as you want it to be. It's kind of really your choice. The only thing I would say is if you are calling back to the opening image, you do want to make it so that it can be deciphered by the reader that you are calling back to it in some way, because if that's what you want to do, you want your reader to know that's what you're doing. And it's fine if not every reader realizes that, but you know, if you want it to be evident, then make sure you're making it evident. And the second option that I often see come up is to tease at sort of the future or the next chapter in the character's life. And this does not necessarily always need to be for series. This can also work for standalones. So for example, in a series, what could happen is that you might want to specifically hint at something that's going to come in the next book. As I was talking about generally in the finale, talking about how you can already kind of start setting up what's going to come in that next book, that little nudge open of the door. This final image is where you can really kind of make a very pointed, prominent stance on this is something we're going to talk about in the next book. And so that's an option for series. And then for standalones, it's really, you can kind of hint at what this character's life is going to be now in the future without necessarily having to show that. And so you can let let the reader kind of extrapolate from whatever you end on to be like, okay, I think this is what's going to be. So, you know, for example, say like their whole town or their city was decimated and destroyed. That final image might be of people slowly putting it back together. And so the reader doesn't need to see the whole town put back together and saved, but when you end on that final image of rebuilding, they can imagine, yeah, they're going to rebuild all this, they're going to have the city back, and X and X and X is going to happen. You're giving some sort of hint or teaser of the future of the character without having to necessarily show it, which is also helpful if you just don't want to go that much in depth. This is that fine balance with the finale. Like, you don't necessarily need to go way into wrapping absolutely everything up. You can kind of end with a final image that hints this is where this is going to go, and this is kind of how this is going to end up. And so I find that to be something that's also common for finishing out the final image. And I'll end talking about the final image here with just discussing that, again, you can choose your own adventure here. You can do whatever you want with the final image. So if either one of those two options doesn't really speak to you, you can do absolutely anything else. I just think that in the words and the presentation of Save the Cat, really what they say is important, and I agree with this, is just that you take a moment to show your character living in this new world. So it's not the act 1 or act 2 or act 3, this kind of a little, well, it's really act 3, but it's act 3 after the wind. You want to show that character in that kind of like wholehearted position, in a positive character arc, of course, but you want to give some sort of snapshot of that. And so that's really just the whole purpose of it. And so however you do that, you can pick and choose and decide. It's just giving that snapshot. And that is it for the finale and the final image video, and for the last video in this Save the Cat deep dive series. Thank you so much to everyone that has watched the series all the way through. Thank you so much to people that found the series before it was finished and have been very patient as I've been very slowly putting out the videos in this series. But I'm very excited to have this be done. I did know this was a bit of a big project when I decided to go through with this, and I'm excited to have gotten to the end of this journey. And I will say, for those of you that are interested or have asked about this or have just listen to me talk about this, I am planning to do a video in which I plan out a complete full Save the Cat beat sheet and share that with you all, talk it through in the video, but also do a little like cheat sheet sort of PDF thing where you can see everything, to help you kind of get an even better idea of how you might put together a full story using Save the Cat in the way that I use Save the Cat. And so I am planning on doing that. It is probably going to take me a while to do that. Currently, I have it planned to be sharing that video in April of next year, so it's a little bit down the line just because it's going to take me a little bit of work. But in between those, I will of course be putting out my regular videos. I also have a lot of different plans for other writing craft videos, and so I'm gonna continue putting out writing craft videos just to share kind of my process and share some of that with you. Also, someone's still talking about Save the Cat, because I know Save the Cat has an idea for like doing series and how they would set out doing a series with Save the Cat. And I find that now that I've done one series and I'm writing another series, I've developed different ways of doing those sorts of things. And so I do have a lot of video ideas for different writing craft videos. If there's something in specifically that you would like me to do, please put it down in the comments and I will check it out. And of course, if you want to see these new videos as they come out, I recommend subscribing to my channel. You can hit that subscribe button, and also turning on notifications, because then you can be notified whenever I have a new video out. But overall, thank you so much for watching this. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up, because it helps other people find this video so they too can watch me talk about Save the Cat for many hours of footage. And that's really it. Thanks so much for joining me on this Save the Cat journey. Bye!